Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm doing a first impressions of Requiem Downfall of Magic from Ludus Magnus Studios. Now, a bunch of things to get into before we dive into this. Number one, this is a first impressions and not a review because I have one scenario to go through. I have a single scenario to go through, and so there's only so much I can really talk about this game because this is a campaign-driven game, a scenario-driven game. Well, I believe it's campaign. You're going to be following through, building up and stuff, so it's going to be a campaign with a bunch of scenarios to go through. I don't know the quantity. I don't know more about a bunch of stuff. I haven't had a boss encounter yet. Those are going to be their own little fun little scenarios. This guy feels wobbly. I hope I don't break it. But anyways, yeah, so I don't have enough content here to call this a review. I will tell you about my first impressions, about what I did experience and how I feel about it and all those things, but definitely not a review. Number two, this is a prototype, all rules and components subject to change, and of course I'll have a link to the Kickstarter campaign down below. And then number three, and very importantly, please note that Board Game Co. did do paid content around this game. While this first impressions is not paid for, they basically reached out to me a few months ago and said, hey, we'd love you to cover the game. I like Ludus Magnus Studios. I said, sure. And then around a week and a half ago, they reached out and said, hey, can we do a sponsored gameplay as well? And so I said, sure to that. But that being said, while the two are separate, this is not being paid for, that is being paid for, I completely understand that if any sponsored content whatsoever muddies the water for you and makes you a little less willing to take everything I say at face value, completely and totally respect that. Check out any other content creators who've covered this game. I don't know who has it and whatnot. That said, of course, I'll try to be mindful and counter my bias as much as possible, but I respect anyone who still prefers that separation entirely. And with that, let's go ahead and talk about Requiem Downfall of Magic. This is a game that's going to take place in the Nova Aetas universe, the universe that is part of Ludus Magnus Studios. They've had a bunch of games have been in that universe, from Black Rose Wars to Nova Aetas, Renaissance to other games that they have that I'm not thinking of offhand. Well, Requiem Downfall of Magic, I guess, for one. And this one seems to be a campaign game that is a little bit lighter in nature. It's not as fully involved as some of the other titles. It's not as hard to get into. The maintenance, the approach, the gameplay, all those things seem a bit lighter. But the general idea is you're going to be going through a sequence of scenarios as you build up and level up your characters across the course of the game. You're going to have characters, and please note, I only have 2 set up over here, but you are going to be having a full 4 for any game you dive into. I believe you always require 4, I think, but past that, you're going to have your cards over here with your stats that are leveling up. You start at level 1, you make your way all the way up to level 8 on the reverse side of this card over here, slowly increasing your stats as you go. The stats over here are basically going to be your health as well as your, oh my gosh, I forgot the title of it. It is your focus. Your focus is going to be that resource you're utilizing, so you have your health, your focus, you have your action markers, which you're going to use to drive actions, you have your characters that have their own little action pool of the different ways they use these markers to drive their actions, as well as any special abilities they might have. You have your deck of skill cards that as you level up, you're going to be able to hold on to different skill cards. So for example, if you see over here, right now we could hold on to 1 skill card, or 2 actually, that's a skill card, that's equipment. We can hold on to 2 skill cards, but as you level up further, you can be holding as many as 6 when you get to level 8. Meanwhile, you're being mindful of the fact that this is a level 2 skill card, this is a level 2 skill card, so from these skill cards over here, I can pick any 2 of these 3 level 2 skill cards, 2+. And as you level up further, you'll have access to more and more skill cards. As you flip these over, these give you different unique skills as far as how the game operates, so I'm not going to focus too heavily on those for right now. I will say you can check out the gameplay over on the channel. There is I don't know which goes up first. This first impressions may be up before the gameplay, but I already did the gameplay. I have gameplay and first impressions will both be available for you to check out if you want to get a larger sense of how the game plays. But past that, so you have your characters, you have your health, you have your focus, which is a resource you're trading in, you have your action markers, you have slots for potions and these little things that will heal you over here. You also have your character cards, you have your dice for combat, and then you have the worldwide board that you're exploring, as well as the chapter that you're going through. To that end, you're going to start by flipping open the chapter, and I'll keep this very spoiler-free. You have some text, you have an objective, you have the setup for the chapter, which I've already done, and then you stop reading, because depending on how you do, you're going to turn to page 7 or 9, depending on how you did in this chapter. So now we have the goals. In this case, our goals are to find as many tracks as possible. What are tracks? Well, there's some indicator of this person we're chasing into the fleeing woods over here, into the woods, fleeing from us, and so we're trying to, in some way, track them down. But how do we find those? No idea, so I guess it's time to go out and explore. That's where you start taking turns in this game. This particular scenario gives you 4 rounds to complete your objective. I don't know if that will be consistent across the game, or if that will change based on what you're playing, but I have 4 rounds to complete my objectives right now. And to that end, I'm going to start spending action markers to start moving forward in the game. Now, there is no enemy phase in this game. There's an upkeep phase, there's your action phase, there's a, round cleanup and all this stuff, and then you rinse and repeat across the 4 rounds. The enemies don't have a phase per se, but they do attack in the end of round phase where they're present. So right now, there are no enemies past the miniatures I have set up on the table around me. I'll go ahead and spend a marker. I'll spend the star marker because that is how I walk with this character, with Beatrice over here. So she's going to go ahead and move on to a new spot, and we're going to go ahead and explore that region on the board, flipping it over. In this prototype, we only have one type of terrain, the woods, but in the full game, you'll have multiple types of terrains to go ahead and explore through. So right now, I found this location. These locations will have various degrees of art on them, although that will vary. Some of them are going to have just basic forest, some of them are going to have various landmarks. Those landmarks will come into play from other cards that you go through. But right now, it's nothing. All it is a location which I can go ahead and explore. To that end, let's go ahead and explore it. I'll flip over this marker over here, which again, this marker I can use a star or a sun over here. I'm going to flip over my marker, and I'm going to go ahead and explore this location. Before we do so, worth noting, you can alternate actions with your characters in any way you want. This character can take action, that character can action, this character can go ahead and support that character. So you're operating as a cohesive team across your 4 characters, using your actions and abilities however it favors you. But right now, we're going to go ahead and grab one of our explore markers, we're going to put it down on the location, and we're going to draw an explore card from this first deck over here, and that's going to be indicated over here. If we flip back to this page over here, the setup page, you'll see that it shows you which types of locations are going to draw from which decks. I assume this is the kind of thing that will get more intricate as you go through the games over here. I assume it's not always just 2 decks, but again, I only have one scenario. I can only fully comment on that. So I'm going to go ahead and draw one of these cards over here. I'm going to read it, and in this case, it's just a crow. We're going to grab that crow, and we're going to put it out onto the board into this location. We now have a crow as an enemy. We can put the card wherever you need to go ahead and keep track of it. It has 2 health. We deal 2 damage to it if you get a sneak attack, and it has 1 attack of opportunity. That's just going to be how it attacks you, and it attacks you with its attack of opportunity a few ways. At the end of every round, it's going to attack you. When you leave the tile, it's going to attack you. And then there are other keywords that can show up for certain characters that will make their attacks of opportunity more frequent and more likely to hit. Right now, attack of opportunity, you're going to roll a die, and only on a 1 or a 2 is it actually going to hit. On a 3 all the way through 6, it won't hit. Only the 1s and 2s will currently hit. But you can have enemies that attack on a 1 to 4, and you can have enemies that attack when you enter the tile. You can have enemies that attack when you activate them in the first place. There are going to be different keywords that make enemies more or less threatening in the game. Right now, the crow's there. I can't really explore further. So let's go ahead and spend a resource to attack. I'm going to spend my moon token to go ahead and attack and go ahead and utilize that. At that point, we're going to grab my dice and the enemy dice. We're going to roll them, and we're going to pair up black versus black and white versus white. Basically, they're going to be, that's a quick way of seeing how things resolve. They're attacking me for 2 damage, and I'm attacking it for 2 damage and a focus, or 1 damage and 2 focus. And since it has 2 defense, I might just say, screw it, I'm not able to hit it anyway, so I'll just go ahead and take the 2 focus and benefit that way, going up there, and over here they're going to attack me for 2 damage. Things are not going well at the start of this game. That's basically how attacks resolve in the game. But again, there's going to be the way they attack you with attacks of opportunity at the end of the round and when you move away, and sometimes other times as well, but generally it's because you're attacking them because they're getting in the way of you actually accomplishing your goals. Now that's a fairly basic way that something like this will play out throughout the course of the game. You're basically trying to go ahead and activate your character's abilities, utilize your action tokens to wander around the board and explore. Exploring is going to slowly open up the board because right now we just found a crow, not a problem, but there's a whole deck of cards to go through and you can explore each region twice. Once we kill that crow, we can have another character wander out here and then go ahead and place one of their tokens on the 2 side to go ahead and draw from the second deck and see what we got. We got another crow. There's more than just crows in these decks. There's other enemies, but there's also opportunities as well to go through, but generally each location can be explored up to 2 times. That's going to get you through all those decks over there, and these decks will trigger different things. Sometimes they're going to trigger you reading a bit of a passage because you have an event from the game. You're going to go ahead and flip open, go through a bit of a passage over here, make a choice as far as how you're encountering. Again, I do recommend you check out the playthrough on the channel. It'll give you a good sense of all the things that can happen in this game because I'm giving you the kind of the rules, the structure, the infrastructure of how it all works, but it all comes together to give you a story. You're chasing someone through the woods. There's a bush over there. It's making some noise. It's rustling. You see a shadow. Do you chase it or back away? You hear a noise. Do you pursue it or do you not pursue it? You see something in the corner. Do you shoot it right away or do you try to, approach it and see what it is and doesn't need help? You have all these choices in the game you're going to be making, driven by these event cards, and then occasionally also going a little bit further down that narrative pathway where you start making sequential, going to this location to go to that location to do this, as you find different ways to approach different enemies that will become more and more difficult, as well as trying to chase down opportunities to get these tracks. But it's all going to be driven by exploring the woods around you. You're currently in the woods, you're trying to explore them, you're going through these decks, you're having those narrative events happen, and you're pursuing those narrative events while ultimately trying to manage your resources, which is both time and your health, as you attempt to accomplish your goals and win the scenario in Requiem, Downfall of Magic. I always forget the title there. Requiem Downfall of Magic. That's kind of basically what you need to know about the game. There's a bunch of other things to go through. Again, you'll get a lot of it from the gameplay, but also a lot of things are trying to cover, well, stuff that I don't want to cover because it's all spoiler territory. There's enemies, you're fighting those enemies, their enemies are more present to slow you down and stop you because you are working with limited time, and so you have to deal with those enemies to be able to continue to explore and engage with the terrain around you. And then past that, you're managing your abilities as well as the various equipment. There's going to be lots of equipment you're going to find in the game, different things you can get your hands on that will give you different ways of getting resources, healing yourself, re-rolling dice when you miss an attacks, weapons. There's going to be all armor over here. There's going to be different things that will help you out in the game as you go through it, and so you're going to try to go ahead and get your hands on those. You'll set up localized markets at times. You'll find like merchants, traveling merchants, where you can try to browse and buy from them and throughout the course of the game. There's going to be rewards when you kill enemies, a bunch of other things, but that in a nutshell is Requiem Downfall of Magic, which means it's time for my first impressions, not really review, starting off with ease of play. Ease of play is going to be one of my larger complaints around the game because of the fact that Requiem Downfall of Magic is one of the things that I am not a huge fan of when it happens in games, which is they give you a fairly chunky rulebook for a game that's not that complicated. Meaning, I don't mind chunky, long rulebooks for games that give you an equally rewarding experience. I find that the longer the rules are, the more complex the rules are, the more rewarding I want the gameplay to be. And I do think that while the rulebook is clear and it's not the hardest to go through, there's a decent amount to go through. I feel the rulebook could have been 10 pages shorter. Like, it's a 40-page rulebook, and not even prototype, a well-formatted 40-page rulebook, and I feel it could have been like 10 pages shorter. I feel it could have been cleaned up and cut down a bit. It's not that... I think arguably I'd say they went for as much clarity as possible at the expense of making the game as easy to go through the rules as fast as possible. So I feel it could have been a shorter rules for the weight class of the game of what it is, but past that, that would be my biggest complaint. The game itself, again, we only have one scenario, so I can't really comment on how long an average scenario is. I can tell you that there's a gameplay on YouTube that took 1 hour and 45 minutes. I think the gameplay I did was around 1 hour and a half, so you're looking somewhere in that range for this one scenario, which is all I have access to. And then table space is not the worst over here. I mean, I'm down 2 characters. I only have 2 characters set up over here, but it's not that much of a table hog, so it's not the worst to deal with in that sense. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like. Oh, and it's a 1 to 4 player game. I think I said that at one point. Anyways, as far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like, which is to begin with, this is Ludus Magnus Studios, including their fantastic table presence. From the art in the game to the miniatures that are beyond amazing, and the general, this like elevated book area over here, which is still very much prototype, but still looks nice even in that sense. Overall, the game just looks very solid and has a table presence, and it has more than just table presence. It has a great exploratory system that really pulls you in and invests you into the world. I had a lot of fun exploring through the woods in this game and getting a sense of mystery, a sense of terror. It felt like there was some degree of pursuit going on, but then a lot of things just happening in the woods. There was an elevated sense of stuff. I'm trying to like remain spoiler free, but stuff was happening, choices were being made. I love the choice system. Frequently throughout the course of the game, you have to make decisions about what to do with unknown stuff happening around you. And I don't know what the other pathways would have led us to as we go through them, but I know that I enjoyed having the tension of like, okay, there's a small boy crying. Do you help him or do you not? Like, how is that going to play out? And so far, I've been very happy with not just the choices, but how the choices resolved. And by happy, I don't mean that it worked out in my favor. I mean that I don't have the sense of I don't have a sense of frustration at the complete unknown of how a choice resolved. It all worked out. Sometimes bad things happen, sometimes good things happen, but it all worked out and gave me a strong sense of agency as well as a narrative sense of agency as you go through the exploratory system. The sense of story, the sense of choose your own adventure, the sense of things unfolding in an order you can't predict, but with a sense of gloom and doom and foreboding all around you in the woods. You get senses of enemies that you will have to fight that are a bit more challenging. You'll get little vague peripheral glances at them here and there, and you'll understand that they exist before they eventually show up in an encounter where you have to finally take them out. And so I like that sense of mystery that the game managed to present. Again, I'm curious how that will unfold over the course of a full campaign. How many different enemies are there? How does that sense of mystery maintain itself without boxes full of miniatures? I don't really know their full plans, which is why it's first impressions and not a review. But so far, I've enjoyed the sense of story, the sense of choose your own adventure, and the way the world develops as you go through it in this one adventure that we've gone through. I think that the game so far has overall enough of a sense of fun with enough danger that it does feel like there's some degree of threat that you might die. I will say, we'll get to it more on things I don't like, but overall I'd say that the sense of danger was present enough. The sense that my characters could die if I'm not careful was present enough, but it didn't feel like a punishing experience, at least not based on this one experience so far, this one scenario. I don't know if it's going to be fail forward or fail or not as far as the game goes. I know that the starting scenario has 2 different outcomes to it. You're going to be leveling up across the course of the game. In fact, I didn't even let me just give me a second over here to read the other outcome. It seems like it's going to be fail forward. It seems like it's going to be fail forward, which personally is another thing I like. I don't like it when a game forces you to replay something just because you happen to fail. I want to proceed to the next thing. And it's a complicated conversation about fail forward versus not in general, but I'd say in general, I prefer fail forward, and it looks like the game's going to have that too, which is another thing I like. So it has a sense of danger, it has a fail forward mechanism, and overall the game is fun. It is, I would say that I don't want to give spoilers to, I guess I already gave spoilers to the gameplay, but we won the gameplay. But I think that overall it was close enough to our ability to find and discover as many things as possible. I enjoyed the game as we're going through it. As far as things I don't like in the game, first of all, like I said already, it is a little rules heavy for a game that is on the lighter side, comparable to other Ludus Magnus Studios titles. I didn't think the game was, severely difficult. I didn't think there was tons of things to manage. I felt it was a lighter experience relative to games like Black Rose Wars, like Nova Aetas Renaissance. And so to that end, while I like lighter to a certain extent, I like all types of games too. Well, not all types. I like a lot of types of games, but I will say the rules were a little longer than I'd like relative to the experience I got out of it. I'll say that there's limited agency on the enemies feeling different, meaning the way the enemies work is they have keywords and some stats, but they all use the same set of enemy dice to roll against you, which is a tricky aspect to go through, because if all the enemies have the exact same stats on their dice, I don't know what Ludus Magnus Studios' plans are around keeping enemies interesting enough. Sure, they have a few keywords, but the resolution and the differences of the keywords, I don't know if those could be interesting enough to keep an enemy interesting throughout the course of a longer experience. So I hope they have plans to, flesh out the enemies more. While it worked well for the scenario I went through, I'd be hesitant to believe that that would be equally as interesting if I was going through a series of 10 scenarios while using the exact same dice and the exact same 6 keywords, and the only other thing that's changed are the stats around the enemies, their health and their sneak attack damage, and then their, opportunity attack damage. I hope that there's more ways to keep the enemies interesting, because right now I'm skeptical that it would remain interesting across a full gameplay experience. So that's more of a concern with the current system as opposed to an actual critique, if that makes sense. Again, it worked well for one scenario, but looking at it, I just have a hard time believing that would work well across an entire game. As far as I can see others not liking, the lack of an enemy phase is going to be a big one. The enemies over here are more reactive. When you attack them, they attack back at the same time. If you are on their tile at the end of the turn, or if you leave, they are attacks of opportunity. But there's more reactiveness. There's no enemies chasing you around the board. There are some abilities on certain enemies that will have them moving around to some degree, but it's very abstracted. It feels very much like you're in your world and the enemies are just there to get in the way, which is fine. I enjoy it for what it is. I enjoy different types of games, and I like the experience this is giving you. But if you want more of an active enemy phase, this is not the game for you. It's not going to give you that. I'll say that I can't see this being quite as much fun at 3 or 4 players. Now, I haven't played this at 3 or 4 players. I've only played this at 2 players. But the amount you get done on your turn, I think I would find my turns less rewarding and less fun if I was only controlling one character in the game relative to the amount of stuff. It means you'd only have 3 turns the entire game, versus at a 2-player game, you literally have 6 turns the entire game. It doubles up as far as your ability and how much you get done. So again, I don't know for sure. This is more of an instinct from playing it, but I think this is primarily going to be a 1 to 2 player experience. I think 1 might be a little too much, honestly. Controlling 4 characters would give me less agency. I think I probably prefer this at 2 players, but understand, again, given the only one scenario, I haven't actually had that opportunity to play at all these player counts. I'm just going by based on how it felt. I think 2 players is going to be the sweet spot. 1 would be satisfying. 3, I think, would be the messiest because you're controlling 4 characters, and 4 might be fine, might work for your group, but it would be a game that I'd be hesitant to dive into at 4 players. As far as final thoughts on Requiem Downfall of Magic, not final thoughts, it's a first impressions. As far as thoughts for now on Requiem Downfall of Magic, overall, I very much enjoyed the game. If I'm rating this based on the single scenario as it is, I would give it a 4 out of 5. But I can't rate a game based on a single scenario, especially if it's a campaign-driven game, and I have no idea if this will hold out to be a continually good experience across the whole thing, or whether it would be a little too light, or have too many of these issues, or the enemies aren't interesting enough. I don't know which issues will come to light as I go through a full campaign experience, so I can't rate it officially. I'd say that I have a hard time believing it'll be less than a 3.5 out of 5. The gameplay experience gave me enough things that I really enjoyed that I want to see more of this. I'm excited to get the final version of the game and dive into this as a somewhat lighter but not super light experience. Again, I don't want to drive home how light it is. It's not super light. It is lighter than other Ludus Magnus Studios titles. There's less going on than Nova Aetas. There's less going on than Black Rose Wars. It is more manageable in that sense. But it's probably more akin to, I would say, a game. In fact, we'll get to it in recommendations. But a game like Destinies, for example, I think it's probably akin to a game like Destinies in terms of the weight class of what the game experience is offering you, just with a longer rulebook than Destiny's has, which is my main complaint there. That's why I'm focusing on the light aspect. But yeah, for right now, if you watch the gameplay, you'll see I was having a lot of fun through that one. I think it's usually pretty clear when I'm having fun on camera, when I'm not. But I enjoy this one a lot, but I don't know how that carries out across a lot of games. I think it is a little bit on the lighter side, yet still enjoyable. The sense of exploration, the systems at play, the sense of agency and growth that your character can experience as you unlock abilities. Like, I've gone through some of these abilities. There are some fun abilities in here that I can't wait to unlock when I'm actually diving into a full actual game. So it's a tentative 4 out of 5 based on a single scenario, with the heavy disclaimer that a single scenario is not a good indicator of how a campaign game holds up. I would say more often than not, for me, most campaign games do get a little less satisfying the more I play them. If you give a game and you create a game that is meant to be experienced across an arc of games, then I judge it based on how it works across that arc of games, and holding that the player's interest for that long while not getting a little stale and boring. Those are things that I just, yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes in the final game. So that's where we are there. I'll also give a note in terms of replayability. I think you could replay this scenario if you wanted to and get more out of it. There is branching choices. There's different things you can do. I think your experience would be less satisfying the second time round, but I think if you're someone, like, I can't imagine playing through this twice. I think I'd play through the entire experience once, but you know, feel free to do you on that. As far as other game recommendations, I mentioned it already, but I think Destiny's is a very similar feeling to what I got out of this. This is not app-driven, very different as far as how it resolves, but I think the weight class of what it's doing, the sense of agency, the sense of teamwork, although this is more teamwork-based. So if you're looking for cooperative Destinies, I think this kind of lands that overall feeling as far as the game goes. And if you're looking for another game in that kind of general experience, Roleplay Adventures from Thunderworks Games is going to be another game that shares similar feelings over there. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.